Hello, I'm Christy Cade with the White Ribbon Alliance.
And I'm Sandy Garson, Coalition Director of the Self-Care Trailblazer Group. We are thrilled to welcome you to the Self-Care Learning and Discovery Series. We are a global coalition dedicated to ensuring everyone practices self-care. We advance self-care advocacy, evidence, practice, and learning to support people meeting their own health goals and to strengthen health systems.
The World Health Organization defines self-care as the ability of individuals, families, and communities to promote health, prevent disease, maintain health, and to cope with illness and disability with or without the support of a healthcare provider. The series has invited more than 50 organizers from around the world to share what self-care means to them in practice through 16 individual sessions. While each session examines self-care through a unique lens, they are very much connected. We encourage you to participate in as many as possible.
The Discovery Series is open to everyone: advocates and activists, healthcare providers, government officials, program implementers, community members, because all of us should have a vested interest in self-care. We hope you share your own ideas and insights throughout the series and keep the conversation going by becoming a member of the Self-Care Trailblazer Group. We'd like to thank the members of the Self-Care Learning and Discovery Series Steering Committee, Advanced Family Planning, JPIGO, PATH, Population Services International, and most of all, White Ribbon Alliance. Without you, this learning opportunity would not be possible.
We also want to thank all of the session organizers who have dedicated their time voluntarily to curate this event. We should also say that each of the organizers took on the responsibility of the content in individual sessions, and so they might not necessarily reflect the views of the steering committee. Please take what you learned today and apply it to advancing policies, programs, and practices that enable self-care, universal health coverage, and your own individual health and well-being. Now, without further ado, we turn it over to today's session organizers. Thank you.
Thank you and enjoy.
Hello, welcome everyone. Let's see here. I want to make sure I don't get ahead of my presenters, but thank you so much for being here. This is the Self-Care and Learning and Discovery Series. This particular session is on self-care's role in mental well-being and defining self-care for the individual and self-care. So we are here to have a conversation around mental health and self-care, and we are so glad you're here. We want to thank White Ribbon Alliance and their partners and the steering committee for providing this platform for us to be here. Sister Love has been in operation in Atlanta for more than 30 years, and we're on a mission to eradicate the adverse impact of HIV and AIDS in women and the people they love in this place or in this space and all around the world. So without delaying this any further, we'll go ahead and get right into it. Before we go into our first icebreaker, we're going to have a brief introduction or a brief walkthrough, if you will, for those of us that may need it, from our friends over at the tech team about how to use the write-in app that we're going to use for the Slido. So if you will.
So today we will be starting with an icebreaker using Slido. So in just a moment, to participate and answer our question for today, you can join in multiple ways. One way you can join is by going to slido.com and entering the PIN 198171, or you can participate by following the link that I just shared in the chat.
Thank you so much, Nana. So if you guys have any questions about how to participate with us, please feel free to drop a question in the chat or just let us know if you're having any trouble. We definitely want to hear from all of you. So we'll go right ahead and get into it. So what we're doing today to break the ice, I was looking for another slide there, forgive that pause. What we're doing today to break the ice is we want to know something about you that you love about yourself. There is a correlation between self-care and self-worth and love and your self-perceptions. So let's start this out with giving compliments to ourselves. And we're going to do it in second person. So you want to start with you are. So just drop it in there and let us see who you are. Tell us who you are in the form of a compliment. We would love that. So I see some entries going in there. This is going to be great. This looks good. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Keep it coming. And if anybody in the audience or in the community is having any issues with participating, just raise your hand and let us know. We want you to be able to engage. These are great. This is great. So I have to say that I'm having a little issue getting into Slido. Nana, should I have to do a login to get in to share?
You shouldn't have to, but are you logging in using the link?
Yes, I am going directly to the link in the chat, and it takes me to the Discover Self-Care Community login.
Yes. So if you're using the link, then you'll have to log into the platform itself. It may be easier if you want to avoid logging in. You can join by your phone at slido.com.
Okay, thank you so much. I see those entries are still coming in. This is great. So we'll have something special. Once you guys put your entries in, we're gonna present this in a very cool way. So keep putting that in there. Think of things that you love about yourself and give yourself a compliment in second person. This is really awesome. It's beautiful. And I'm going to get myself in there too, so I can at least. Okay. Awesome. So it looks like I'm going to put that one in there for her. We got a couple in the chat that I'm going to just drop in to the Slido so that they are included in the final presentation. This is excellent. Okay. Okay, thanks everyone. Nana, I think we can close that poll now. Oh, wait a minute. We still have others coming in. Wait a minute. I don't want to stop it if we still have others coming in. Awesome. If you just joined us, we are sharing our favorite things about ourselves in the form of compliments to ourselves in the second person. So we're starting with you are, and we have some beautiful responses. Great. Thank you for joining us. For those of you that just came, please feel free to participate with us in our first poll or our first engagement activity. We're asking you to share a compliment. And it is absolutely okay for you to drop it in the chat. We can get those added to the word cloud as well. Awesome. Okay, Nana, we can go ahead. I don't know if we can we keep the Slido open while we go forward, or is that something we need?
The Slido will stay open as we.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, great. So it's not like the whiteboard. So we can go ahead and get into the conversation. Please feel free to keep dropping those compliments in there. Awesome. So I'm going to start off by introducing myself and obviously the speakers that are here with us today. We have let me get myself together here. Thank you for your grace. All right, so we have a very talented cast of guest speakers today, and I'll go into more details about these extraordinary folks as we get further into the conversation. I'm your enthusiastic host, moderator, and I'm so happy to be here. My name is Tamika English, and I work as the operations manager for Sister Love. I feel so favored to be in this space with you today, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the folks that we'll be speaking with today. So we have Miss Freedom Bay, who received her Bachelor's of Science degree in nursing from Adelphite University in New York. Her master's degree in medical informatics was was earned at SUNY Downstate Medical Center. Welcome, and thank you so much for being with us today, Ms. Freedom.
Thank you, Tamika. Thank you for having me all.
Oh, absolutely. We're honored. Sir Jose Bright is with us as well. And he is a master mindfulness and meditation instructor. He has been working with at-risk youth, entrepreneurs, and community leaders for over 30 years with the aim to facilitate them building their own practical mindfulness and meditation practice with great success. I had the pleasure of being around Sir Jose in person, in the flesh, and it is, I have to tell you, a wonderful, wonderful experience. He just lifts the room up just with his presence. Sir Jose, welcome, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And last but not least, my esteemed colleague, Dr. TaMara Rose. She has a Doctor of Philosophy in Human Sexuality, a Doctor of Human Sexuality, a Master of Social Work with a clinical focus, a Master of Science in Education, and a Bachelor of Arts degree in Family Life Education. She holds several sexuality-related certificates, including sex therapy, clinical sexology, goddess-steam womb healing arts teacher, fertility stimulation massage specialist, and that's just to name a few. So without having to say much more, welcome, Dr. Rose. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
It is my pleasure and honor to serve. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, thank you. So we'll jump right in. We can go right to that next slide, and we're gonna do another engagement here. We wanna hear from our audience. So here you can jump in. If you want to speak audio, just raise your hand or unmute yourself. If you want to do the Slido, which we would love for you to do that. But we want to ask you guys a question, our audience. What are your unique definitions and perspectives of self-care? And this is for our panelists as well. Please jump in there. Use single words or short phrases to describe what self-care means to you. And so this is another opportunity for us to engage. We want to hear from you, our audience. What does self-care mean to you? You can give it to us in words or short phrases. It can be actions or feelings. Tell us, what does self-care mean? Give us some ideas of what your perceptions around self-care look like.
Can I speak?
Yes, please, go ahead.
According to my definition, self-care is taking care of myself and all. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. I hope that you guys were able to hear her. That audio was a little challenged, but she definitely said that self-care is taking care of herself. And I missed the last part. Did you want to repeat that for us, Ms. Wright?
And taking care of myself and other all people.
And understood. Thank you so much for sharing. In the chat, we have some feedback too. Jamal says well-being. Ms. Dazan, thank you for joining us. Says giving myself grace, gratitude, and forgiveness at all times. Carrie says doing something. Oops, I missed that one. Hold on, let me get back to it. Yeah, Carrie says doing something that nurtures me and makes me feel valued. Nana, I'm not sure if this is something that your team can support with, but I would love to grab the entries from the chat and drop them in the Slido so that we can have a robust word cloud. If it's not possible, no worries. Your team has been awesome, so I don't want to ask anything more. But yeah, we want to be able to capture all of this. Well, Tom says first listen, then act appropriately to other human beings. That's awesome. Time to oneself despite a busy schedule, taking care of mental, physical, social, emotional, and spiritual needs. Okay, thank you. Good feeling from Radhika. Let's see. So I just want to do a quick tech check. On my end, in my Slido, Nana, I don't see this particular question. Should the questions update as we go? Or Lily? I'm not seeing that question in my Slido, so I just wanted to. Oh, okay. All righty. Thank you. So we are taking then entries in the chat because it looks like we did not create the Slido for this one. Self-care means taking care of oneself in every aspect. I hear someone wanting to speak. Is there someone? Living in my body and being present. That. Margaret said time alone. Edna says loving oneself first and wholly as a responsibility. These are great. It was definitely my intention to capture these in the Slido for you guys to be able to write these in so we could actually capture them. So I'll make a note of the chat and see what I can do to rectify that. So we'll go ahead and move forward. Thank you so much for sharing. Continue to drop those in the chat as you will in terms of your unique perspective and definitions around self-care. We can go ahead and move into the formal definition provided to us by the World Health Organization, which has been shared with us by our partners, but we'll go back over that. The WHO defines self-care as the ability of individuals, families, and communities to promote health, prevent disease, maintain health, and to cope with illness and disability with or without the support care of a healthcare provider. According to, and it's on our next slide here, according to Oxford Languages, the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's health defines self-care. And then it goes further to say that the practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness, in particular during periods of stress. And then on our next slide, according to Merriam-Webster, the definition of self-care is simply to care for oneself. And then it goes into specifically health care provided by oneself, often without the consultation of a medical professional. And you'll see those examples there. And so these are some formal definitions. And on my next slide, what I did was I took out some keywords from each definition just to kind of do a knock-up, if you will. I wanted to be able to see in comparison how these definitions may have had some commonality. And what I noticed that two out of three of them mentioned without a trained provider as part of the definition. So this implies a relationship between self-care and the absence of a doctor. And I thought that was interesting in terms of defining self-care, specifically mentioning the trained healthcare professional. And so on our next slide, what we're going to do is talk about, obviously we're here to outline some ways, right, that we can all practice self-care. That's what we're all here for. That's what I gathered these awesome panelists for, to give you some practical steps. But what we'll do first is honor and acknowledge what folks may consider to be barriers, okay? So the presentation is centered on paths to self-care, but we must acknowledge what many see to be barriers to self-care. According to the 2019 US Census Bureau, 26.1 million Americans did not have health insurance, and 34 million people were living in poverty. When you add other layers like race and gender identity, you'll see disproportionate numbers of these demographics represented in these statistics. And so there are all these things to be considered in terms of access and resources and availability and status that may play into how people see themselves in, accessing self-care or being able to practice self-care. And I've only listed just a few here. There are other factors to consider, and we'll move on to our next slide. When I think of those other factors, I think of you, our audience, again. So I'm all up in your face again. I want you to engage. I want us to do this a back and forth thing. When I think of other factors, I think of you and your experiences. Your experiences can provide insight as to what others may experience as barriers. So let's take a moment and share some ways that you identify. So we're not looking to necessarily highlight barriers here because, you know, we believe in the power of our word, but what we do want to know is how you identify, because how you identify might help us identify barriers for others, right? Does that make sense? So let's participate again. Let's do the Slido thing. Let me see, I'm going to go back in there And I want to know from you, what are some of the ways that you identify? Use one-word phrases to name the different ways you define yourself. And then I want to make sure that people can make multiple entries. Okay, yes, I see that. Wonderful. Tell us, how do you define yourself? If you are just joining us, we are dropping ways that we define ourselves in the chat. And in this case, I'm going to just go ahead and start dropping. We're not doing it in the chat. We're supposed to do it in Slido, but I'm going to start grabbing some of those from the chat. Oh, no, that's right. Beautiful. Mr. said, with hijab, bold, action-oriented leader. I love that. Thank you. Oh, she said, simply a human being. That's good. Beautiful. Yep, Kimberly, it makes a difference. You know, you put mom in, and working mom is that's a different identity, totally different experience. Yeah. So you see, when you look at this, I'm just giving you guys an example of what I was going for here. When you look at this, and I want to make sure, Nana, does the audience also have eyes on the word cloud right now?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Awesome, awesome. So let's take for an example. I love that someone put in here, where was it? This is the one. It moved around that fast. Okay, so we got thoughtful and generous on here. And I know that some folks' barriers to self-care is their overabundance of thoughtful and generosity for others. And so what I'm saying here is that this word cloud can give us ideas as to what others may see as barriers. And there's simply ways that we identify as to not focus so much on the barriers, but just know that the barriers can be as diverse as the ways that we identify. And we want to honor that before we get into this conversation of how self-care is so easy. Does that make sense, everyone? And I want to take a moment and see if my panelists want to add anything. If there's anything you want to jump in there, feel free.
I've added mine to the word cloud. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And it's still filling up. People are still adding things to the word cloud. This is beautiful. I love it. It's very diverse. I see Nigerian, I see advocate, I see queer, I see feminist. It's just beautiful. This is exactly why I wanted to do this. And we'll be able to hold on to this after this conversation to see the product of us having a collective dialogue. So we can go ahead and move forward now, Nana. Yes, you are beautiful. Ade Duan, I think that's how you say it, Ade. I'll just call you Ade for short. So we're gonna go ahead and get into our first presentation, our first guest speaker. One of the main barriers we all may experience to self-care is trauma. And Dr. TaMara Rose Campbell is with us to shed light on the topic of trauma. Dr. TaMara is the author of several books. TaMara is also currently the editor-in-chief of Our Sexuality magazine, the premier magazine for women's sexuality and sexual health. She is a freelance writer for many online magazines, social media websites, and her personal blog, Live Inspired, Feel Empowered. Dr. TaMara has been featured in Ebony Magazine, Essence Magazine, Men's Fitness Magazine, Dame, I hope I'm saying that right, Courageous Woman Magazine, blackdoctor.org, sexpert.com, and many more. Let's all welcome Dr. TaMara Rose to have a conversation with us around trauma and how we can begin to take practical steps to rectify. Thank you, Dr. Rose, for being here. Welcome, welcome.
Yes, thank you again for the opportunity and the honor to serve and have a very important conversation, around self-care, because oftentimes we get bogged down in our life and all these other things that are going on. And we, especially as Black women, we take care of everybody else because this superwoman narrative that we currently live under has us, like I said, taking care of everybody else except ourselves. And so because of that, we often negate self-care. And then the other thing around self-care is that we tend to think self-care is selfish given the current narrative and conditioning around self-care. And I absolutely like to say, yes, it is, right? Because self is who we are. And the ish is the things that we need to unpack in order to heal and be present and show up every day in our bodies. And so, yeah, next slide, please. All right, so in order to be an effective practitioner, clinician, director, manager, counselor, therapist, etc., human being, right? Just a human being. First, we must heal our traumas. And so I'm just going to put out a disclaimer and a trigger warning. Some of the content may be a little triggering for anyone. If it is, I want you to please feel free to be selfish enough to excuse yourself from the presentation and do whatever it is you need to do to take care of yourself. And we always welcome you back to this space with so much love and kindness and grace. All right, next slide. What? I've been traumatized? Absolutely. Yes, you have. We have all been traumatized. And I love to have conversations around trauma because oftentimes we look at trauma as this big one-time event, right? Or this major catastrophe such as, let's say, coronavirus, right? Or maybe slavery, the Holocaust, or a car accident. We think of these huge things as trauma, right? But trauma is so much more than that. And I want us to kind of start wrapping our minds around reframing what trauma is so that we can begin to unpack them in a way that's very purposeful, intentional, and helpful, in a way that we can also utilize these traumas to help inform our self-care. Next slide, please. All right, so when we talk about trauma, what is trauma, right? Trauma is a type of physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, energetical, social, legal, financial, institutional, historical, biochemical, environmental, medical, etc., right? Damage that occurs as a result of a severely distressing event. And this event can be a single event, right? Something that happens to us one time, or it can be repeated events that occur throughout our life. And it eventually leads to long-term, not so positive consequences, especially, right, if we do not tend to those traumas, they become disease and or dis-ease. And so when we talk about disease, what does that mean? That means those things such as, high blood pressure, diabetes, hypertension, those physical ailments that manifest themselves in our body as a result of not tending to the trauma, right, that we've experienced, again, whether it was individual or whether it was collective, whether it was one time or whether it was repeated and occurring over our lifetime. And dis-ease would be those things like what some folk like to call mental health challenges, right? Stress, anxiety, depression, and so on and so forth. Anything that causes us to be uncomfortable showing up in spaces and places or uncomfortable in our body. And so when we talk about emotional traumas, right, we kind of understand what that is. Those are any traumas that impact us emotionally. Mental trauma would be those things that impact our mental well-being. Spiritual trauma would then be anything that helps us to question our faith, or maybe how religion may be used in the context of its rhetoric and its dogma to control, manipulate, and it creates some disease and dis-ease. Social trauma would be trauma that society creates, like the narrative around, good girls don't, or that narrative around, let's say, anything that society, again, just kind of perpetuates, and it traumatizes us and it makes us feel less than, right? That would also be those things like isms, like racism, heterosexism. Those types of things are considered social traumas. Legal traumas will be like anytime we interact with the legal system or the justice system in a way that creates some type of trauma. And I don't know about y'all, but at some point in my life, I have definitely had some type of financial trauma. If you can't pay your bills, you are experiencing some type of financial trauma, trying to figure out how you and your family may, have to figure out a way to eat. Institutional trauma. Yeah, trauma that is inflicted upon us by institution, whether it's the medical institution, whether it's let's say a school, educational institution, or the institution of slavery, right? Historical trauma would be those ancestral imprints that are encoded within our DNA that have been passed down through our ancestral lineage. Biochemical trauma, again, would be things that have been encoded in our DNA, our medications that we're taking that are interacting with our body that's causing some disease and or disease. Environmental trauma, again, those things that occur in the environment. It could be those things like if you live next to, different types of plants and they're creating the toxicity in the environment, and so on and so forth. So you kind of see where I'm going with this, right? And again, it's important to realize that trauma can be individual or it can be collective, meaning that I, TaMara, as an individual can experience a trauma on my own, right? And at some point I have said in every area of those particular types of traumas that we've just named, or it could be collective. Again, coronavirus is an amazing, unfortunately, example of what a collective trauma could potentially look like for those of us who've been, trapped in the house or whatever the case may be for the past year and a half or so, right? We've experienced some type of collective trauma in terms of our normal, whatever the hell that is, has changed for many people. And so now how do we deal with that? How do we move through the trauma of that? And traumas can be reimagined by what we call triggers, those things that kind of reactivate those traumas that we have experienced time and time again. Trauma can be suppressed because the way that trauma is stored in our brain is stored in fragmented pieces. That's the brain's way of protecting us, because at that particular point, maybe when we've experienced the trauma, we might not be able to particularly handle that trauma. And so the brain will fragment that experience, and we may have what's called dissociation or out of body
वो
experience.
इंदर
Not in a
बंद करके वो पहले सामान निकाल दे.
We're not in a space where we're able to, kind of process and work through that trauma, and we might experience a break with reality. So that's our brain's way of kind of suppressing the trauma, fragmenting the pieces and suppressing that. But here's the interesting thing about that: when those traumas are right, those pieces begin to reintegrate themselves into each other, and it's at that point we may begin to remember what the trauma is. And so then trauma can threaten our sense of functioning, our sense of self-esteem, our self-efficacy, or our ability and belief in our ability, to be able to do what it is we so desire to do. It threatens our safety, our development, our mental health, our survival. And again, trauma threatens our ability to provide us with self-care, depending on what particular dimension you reside in. We may have a disjointed relationship with self-care, and that's due to our traumas. And trauma affects us differently, right? So we can grow up in the same house in the same city with the same parents, and we might have parents who are not so necessarily on the spectrum of healthy, right? Because they're living life through their lens of
सामान ले आएगा वो लोग.
healed. They're living life through their trauma, through their lens of trauma, maybe healed and or unhealed. And because of that, it may impact us. But depending on our protective factors and those sorts of things will determine how our trauma will affect us. Again, let's think about coronavirus. Some of us have used this as an opportunity to sit in the silence with ourselves and use it as a space of growth and healing, while others may have not been dealing so well with the experience, right? And so you see, because we're all individuals with unique intricacies about ourselves, protective factors and strength factors, our traumas will impact us differently. And it's complex. And it's multidimensional, right? And so when we talk about complex and multidimensional, this is why what makes it so difficult for trauma to heal or for us to face our traumas. Because the thing about it is, if you don't address your trauma or work towards healing your trauma in one particular dimension or all particular dimensions, right, you will experience an imbalance. And that's when you will result, and that results in disease and or dis-ease, right? And so I just want to stop right here because that's a lot of information. Are there any thoughts, questions? I don't see anything, scrolling through the chat, but I always want to create space to make sure that we're receiving the information in the way that it's intended. Yeah, no? All right, so let's move forward to the next slide. All right, so what are some of your sources of trauma? Again, we're going to use Slido, I believe that's how it's pronounced, and we're going to write down some ways that we've experienced trauma. And again, trauma could be something such as breaking a finger, because that's the loss of your normal or natural functioning. You can't use that finger the way that you used to be able to use it. So it may create some trauma for you. You may not be able to write anymore, especially if it's your, the hand that you usually write with. Or it may be something a little bit more difficult that you've experienced. And again, I put out the trigger warning. If this is a little too much for you, please excuse yourself and take care of yourself in a space that helps to support you. Perfect opportunity to practice some self-care at. Yeah, so let's go ahead and write those traumas down. Or some sources of trauma. So for example, have you experienced religious trauma? Have you experienced institutional trauma, financial trauma, legal trauma, societal trauma? Also, and thinking about, stress. Stress definitely causes us trauma because it creates a response in our body, and the cortisol is released through our body, creating muscle tension, creating anxiety, creating all of these different sorts of emotions and mental experiences, spiritual experiences, legal experiences, and it impacts our ability to function. So yes, stress is definitely related to trauma. And stress, yes, it can definitely be good or bad depending on the experience. So if you are, in a space of trauma around something that is, kind of good that's happening in your life, you might get all anxious, you might get excited. That creates stress. And in that way, stress, the experience may be related to something positive, or again, the stress could be related to something not so good that's happened, right? And I just want to just say, I honor you so much for opening your hearts and your minds and your spirits and your souls to this experience, because it can be tough to kind of tap into these spaces and places at times, but it's so necessary for self-care and healing, right? Because that's a part of self-care. Yes. Mm-hmm. All right, so I don't want to belabor this point too much because we all kind of get it, right? If we're finished sharing and being transparent and vulnerable in this moment, I'd like to just move us forward, because I think it's now time to, start to talk about, a little bit more self-care and how we can embody that. All right. And so, yeah, looking at the word cloud, we've talked about a lot of different, what I call dimensions that trauma can sit in, right? And so I want to encourage you moving forward to think about some of these dimensions, right? And again, no matter how big, whatever big is to you, or, major, and how ever small, or whatever small is to you, not so big, areas where you've experienced trauma and start to unpack that, right? Because in moving forward, right, it's going to be important that we heal those things, and we will heal them through some of the self-care techniques that we talk about later, right? So familiar trauma, ancestral trauma, those things that are passed down through our lineage, right? We like to refer to them sometimes as intergenerational patterns. At any given time, we are holding anywhere between 7 to 14 intergenerational patterns within our DNA, encoded within our DNA, right? And so that's why it's sometimes hard to make behavior changes, because these things are a part of our DNA, our muscle memory, our cellular memory. And so, yeah, it's important that we understand where these things come from so that we can make healthier behavior changes. Genetics, sexual trauma, trauma from our culture. And when we talk about culture, we're not just referring to cultures within race, but your culture at work, the other culture that you may be a part of as a result of being a part of a particular community or a hobby that you're participating in. Those things are cultures. And even within those cultures, there are subcultures. So there's multiple layers of trauma that we can experience in at any given time. So that's why we're hurting. That's why we're in pain. That's why our body is all tensed up and we're not breathing. And you'd be surprised how powerful just a simple breath is, which will help release the toxins in your body, help release the stress that we're holding in our body on a daily basis. I know I'm very guilty of not breathing throughout the day. Societal trauma, legal trauma, religious trauma, environmental trauma. And you see the list. I'm not going to belabor the point, but you kind of see the list of where our traumas come from. So what I want to do is encourage you later on today, this weekend, when your spirit so leads you to, is to think about this list and unpack it, and then utilize some of the self-care tips that we're going to talk about later on today from some of my esteemed colleagues. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so how do we heal our trauma? Here's the thing, my beloveds, most of us sit in a space where we are afraid, right, to heal our trauma because it's painful. And it's an often slow process of all the parts, the experiences, and the memories as they begin to resurface. And then the bottom line is that we have to face our ish. Like, it's very hard sometimes to sit in a mirror and just say, this has happened to me. And here's the other piece of accountability. My role in that was. And a lot of times it's very difficult for us to do that. But in order to really be informed with healing and self-care, we have to be authentic. And that means facing our ish, right? And so here's the thing, once we commit to doing the work, the pieces of the puzzle begin to slowly come together. And here's the other thing, my loves, it's a journey. Healing is not a destination. It is not a destination, but a beautiful journey that we take over the context of our life. And so what I think that is where my presentation ends. I want to say thank you for this space and offer much gratitude. And at this time, I'll entertain any questions via the chat or via verbal comment.
There's something here specifically that you were asked to address, and I'll read that out to you. It says, could you talk about how trauma and stress are related or distinct? I think many people conflate the two, but I think that there is no positive trauma, but stress can either be good or bad. And that was shared by Ms. Dezon, who's with us today.
Yeah, I saw that comment, and thank you for that. And I spoke to it, but I'll speak to it again. Stress and trauma are related in that traumas will definitely cause you stress, right? And create a response in your body that contributes to disease and or dis-ease, right? And we talked a little bit about what disease and dis-ease were. But stress can also be something that results from something that's good. So for example, you might be offered a job, right? And it might create some stress because now you got to get out of your other job. You may have to move. You may have to learn what's the new company's policies and procedures. And for some people, that may create a little bit of stress, right? And in that way, stress may be good. However, I still want to encourage you, even in those times of good stress, right? Whatever good is to you, because that's subjective, right? I want to encourage you to still breathe through it so that it does not become stuck in your body, creating disease or dis-ease. Because anytime there's an energetical type of a occurrence within our body, right, we have to release that energy, because if we do not release that energy, it gets stuck and stagnant within our chakras, which are those energy centers in our body that are designed to keep us in a state of balance and a state of wholeness. And anytime those energetical centers are not in alignment, right, then we get, like I said, disease or dis-ease. And so I hope that answers the question in a different way. Are there any other thoughts or questions, things people would like to share about trauma and or healing? Yes, I agree. Being able to acknowledge the multitude of experiences that are micro and macro traumatic moments are critical. Yes, yes, because we are all at any given moment walking around wounded because we've been traumatized, all of us, no matter who we are, no matter what space we sit in, no matter how great we are, no matter how not so great we are, no matter our degrees, no matter our labels and our titles, we all have had some type of trauma. Again, it could be individual, it could be collective. And so it's so important to unpack that. And I want to push you lovingly and nudge you to kind of unpack that. Anything else? Any other thoughts, comments, or concerns? Thank you. Thank you. Please feel free, if you're not able to at this time, reach out in a space. I'll drop my email and you can reach out to me at any other time. I'm here for you to serve. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you, Dr. Rose, for that very, very beautiful presentation. Dealing with our traumas can certainly lead to better mental health outcomes. Another objective of this session is to help draw the parallel between self-care and mental health. It can be theorized that the two, mental health and self-care, they sort of feed each other. The more I self-care, the better my mental health. Conversely, the better my mental health, the more inclined I am to self-care. I have been lovingly reminded to acknowledge the global experiences that are on this call. We have no choice but to have this conversation from a US or Black woman context, but we want to remember that you are there, and we want to do the best that we can to use inclusive language and acknowledge the experiences of women around the globe, women and people, around this globe. So while we're having the conversation from this lens, we want to acknowledge that it extends beyond these boundaries, and we want to acknowledge your experiences. So feel free to jump in and correct us when we're wrong or give us insight when we may miss something, but we definitely want to acknowledge the global experience that is represented on this call. Okay. With that being said, thank you again, Dr. Rose. That was amazing. We can go on into our next portion here. And I've already talked about this, so we can go past that one as well. One of the best ways to check in with where you are in terms of mental health is how you feel. It's easy to assess where you are with just assessing, like, what are you feeling on a regular basis? So I'm asking, if you will, engage with us. What are some of the emotions you feel on typical days? And write as many emotions as you feel, the good ones, the ugly ones, the up ones, the down ones, but just make note of some of the emotions that come up for you in your experience and share them with us, if you will, in this forum. We're going to open another Slido, and I would look to get your responses. And it is absolutely okay for you to drop your responses in the chat as well. I see strong and blessed. Joseph, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. Tashidi says she feels grateful. It would make sense. And so just for you to know, when the words are larger in the word cloud, that means that more than one person has chosen that response. And so the more people that chooses that response, the more people that choose that response, the bigger the word gets. So that gives you an idea of what our audience is feeling overwhelmed is huge and in the center, and that is completely understandable during this time, but it gives us a good check in terms of what we might need to do at this point. Dr. TaMara, before I get too far ahead, I was supposed to ask you something at the end of your presentation. Would you mind, as the audience continues to tell us what some of these emotions that they feel, please continue to do that. Would you mind sharing with us 1, 2, or 3 practical steps that we on this call can take toward self-care, whether it's dealing with trauma that you've already discussed or any other practical advice that you can offer? 1 to 3 very easy to follow steps where we can get closer to our well-being through self-care.
Yeah, thank you for that. I feel like one of the most essential things that we can do, and I know that I do this on a daily basis, and when I work with my clients, right, I encourage them to do this, is to give yourself permission. We oftentimes get permission from everybody else because that's how we're conditioned, right? From the time we're born, we're getting permission from our parents, we're getting permission from then our other caregivers in our life, our teachers, then our employers, our spouses. We get permission from everybody else but ourselves. And so give yourself permission, even if that's every other minute, you have to give yourself permission to live, right? To be present, to show up in your body and experience life how you so desire to, right? And so that's another one thing. Another thing is to affirm yourself, you know, and this is a difficult activity, especially for those of us who sit in a space of needing approval from other people or needing validation from other people, but try to give yourself try to affirm yourself on a daily basis. What does that look like? That may look like saying, TaMara, you are worthy. TaMara, you don't need anybody else's approval but TaMara's. TaMara, you are loved simply because you were created out of love. TaMara, you are worthy simply because you're a human being on this earth. And also mirror activities. Look at yourself in the eyes. That deepens the experience and the connection with the affirmation, right? And that's hard because sometimes we have a challenge with looking in our eyes, and depending on your culture, that also may not be something that you're used to, especially if you're a woman that resides, or a woman that resides in a particular culture. That may not be something that you have been able to do, is eye contact, right? So yeah, give yourself permission, affirm yourself however many times you need to do that a day, even with the permission. And then, do some mirror work and just, love on yourself and hug yourself. Right now, everybody should do this right now. Just hug yourself and just tell yourself that you are worthy, special, and loved just because you are. You don't need any other reason, just because you are.
That's beautiful. So I want to make sure we got that. I'm gonna read that back because our team on the other side is taking notes of this for us to have our game plan by the end of the session. Dr. TaMara Rose has advised from a practical standpoint ways that you might be able to practice self-care. Give yourself permission, affirm yourself, and do some mirror work. Love and hug on yourself. Did I get that right?
You got it. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. So we were collecting the emotions. I love that grateful is now bigger than overwhelmed. Do you see that, guys? And so what this exemplifies for me is that we can be overwhelmed and still find gratitude in the midst of it. And that's what it's all about, looking for the light. As a student of mindfulness, I know for sure that what I focus on amplifies. And even in a time where this is a very overwhelming time to exist, there is still these things to be so grateful for. And if we look for them, they're all around us. So this word cloud brings me joy, just seeing how diverse it is and how we're having this collective experience together. We're feeling some of the same things, and even across waters and borders, we're having experiences that reflect each other. And so this is an illustration of that. So thanks everyone for participating and sharing your emotions, sharing what you feel on a regular basis. We really appreciate that. So I am excited about introducing our next speaker. I am going to be very transparent and let you know that I'm going to slow my words down a little bit, and we're going to stall this out just a little bit because she's working on rectifying some technical issues that she's having right now. So in the spirit of grace, forgiveness, and gratitude, we're going to, just slow things down just a bit to give her an opportunity to take care of that. And if you have any, if you've got questions or anything, free, just let us know. We can help. But I will go ahead and introduce her. And hopefully we'll get those issues taken care of. Freedom joins the conversation from the perspective of a healthcare professional working in the field. Freedom is committed to the quality of care she offers, often serving outside the scope of what she is normally expected of someone in her position, often serving outside the scope of what is normally expected of someone in her position. She believes firmly in the mind, body, and spirit connection, and so she gives attention from this lens. She leads a recently established sister cipher focused on bringing women and their experiences together to practice intentional healing and radical self-love and care. I'm not sure if she's ready. It looks like she is. I'd love to welcome Miss Freedom Bay. Everyone welcome Freedom. So hit your mute button. You're talking to mute. I think you're talking to mute. Yeah. Unmute yourself. Oh, there you go.
Good morning, all. Thank you, Tamika, for that introduction. So I'm just going to jump right into it. Typically, it is assumed that most untoward patient outcomes has a lot to do with our clients being non-compliant. I would like to focus our attention on healthcare providers having meaningful conversation with patients on self-care. Next slide. And I think this, hold on one second. And so what is self-care? For some, it is a special day that they splurge, that they allocate to be selfish. And although those things can help us feel better about ourselves, it really should not consist of anything that we have to do outside of ourselves. Self-care has everything to do with just the self. I and I. Next slide. Self-care to me is a daily practice that helps to nourish my well-being. Self-care should be a holistic approach that encompasses our mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being. Next slide, please. I am going to highlight some issues that we are dealing with in the US, but not exclusive to Americans. According to the CDC, 6 in 10 adults in the US have chronic diseases, and 4 in 10 adults have 2 or more. Key lifestyle risks for chronic disease are tobacco use, poor nutrition, lack of physical activity, and excessive alcohol use. Chronic diseases in America is the leading cause of death and disability. Next slide. Suicide rate in the US. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death amongst all age groups. However, it is the 2nd leading cause of death among age group of 10 to 34-year-olds. Next slide. Once again, according to the CDC, more than 93,000 people died from drug overdose in the United States in 2020, which has increased by nearly 30% from 2019. And almost 70,000 involve opioids. Over 70% of drug overdose death in 2019 involve opioids. Opioids have increased over 6 times since 1999. So looking at the state of chronic illnesses, drug overdose, and suicide rate, I think it's safe to say that we are doing something fundamentally wrong in the self-care department. There needs to be a radical change movement on how we care for ourselves and how we care for one another collectively. This is definitely a we problem. Yeah, I know we should be using positive words, but definitely it's a problem. Next slide. So healthcare providers, we pride ourselves on providing patient-centered care. And there are some key questions we can start asking our patients. And we can start off by just asking them, how do they take care of themselves on a day-to-day basis? That alone is a loaded question. This is a question that we all need to examine. Taking time to assess our food choices, habits, risky habits, paying close attention to how we internally feel and speak to and about ourselves has everything to do with self-care. We also need to understand what wellness, quality of life, and optimal health looks like for our patients individually. And although they are coming to us for guidance, we need to also understand and ask them, how is it that we can assist them on their journey? Next slide. There's multiple barriers to effective communication in the healthcare system. I'm just going to name a few. Work overload. Providers often feel overworked, staffing shortage, lack of time. Providers are constantly complaining about the increase in documentation, which compromises patient care. Poor communication skill is a major one. A lot of us fail to realize that a key component to effective and excellent communication is truly listening to our patients. Lack of trust. If clinicians don't seem interested in knowing their patient's journey pre-diagnosis, how can our patients trust that they are receiving patient-centered care? So a major one for me is the idea that we are the experts and we know what's best. Obviously, there's many more barriers. These are just to name a few. Next slide. So patient engagement is pivotal in helping them to recognize ambivalence, fear of change, their desires, setting realistic goals that are attainable and safe. Truly, the patient is the expert. Although they seek our expertise, they know their situation best. Developing trust. The client's agenda is most important, not the clinician's. The patient should always be the focus and not their medical charts. People can sense when we're rushing through their visit, and that can quickly develop doubt in our patients. Next slide. Oh, no, I'm sorry, you can stay on this one. Involving patient in their plan of care is another key one. As clinicians, as providers, we have tasks that we need to accomplish, but it should be, once again, a partnering with our patients. We need to just ask them if the plan of care, if the treatment plan is doable. And if it isn't, what are their concerns? Simply understanding that can provide insight on how to best meet their needs. Empowering our patients to self-assess is important. Traditionally, we go over a list of do's and don'ts with our clients. And somehow we expect, after going over that list, that they'll be compliant. And for some reason, that's not working. We all know Einstein's definition of insanity, which is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So the model of do this and that doesn't constitute as teaching, nor is it empowering or engaging. So we just have, that's just not working. And we're pushing that agenda, and we're creating a disconnect between our patients and healthcare providers. Self-care management support. Largely what we do as providers is provide health teaching and treatment plans. And although those things are vital, it isn't enough. Confidence is necessary for patients to believe that they can successfully make health behavior changes. Assisting our patients to set realistic goals based on their health, age, values, beliefs, friends and family support can increase patients' self-assessing skills and confidence in managing their self-care, chronic health conditions, and wellness. And so I think the most important thing here is that we as clinicians really need to listen to our patients. As I mentioned, they are the experts, and so they are the one that's going to really guide the plan of care, not what tasks we can check off on the list of things that we need to document. And so that's the end of that. We need to make some changes as clinicians.
Freedom, thank you so much. So I'm going to just stay with me for just a moment, because I'm going to be honest with the audience and say that when I initially submitted this, I asked Freedom to have a conversation around how clients need to be talking to their healthcare providers about their self-care. And she spent some time with it, but then she came back and she said, it's not just always on the patient. And I was shocked, because you don't hear that from providers. The theory is, and I think even what's written in terms of law and liability, is that it's on the burden is on the patient. And so I was moved, I was shocked, I was inspired, and all of those things when she said, no, I'm not going to do my presentation from that standpoint. I'm going to say that healthcare providers need to be doing a better job of communicating and listening and being available for their patients. And especially during this time when our healthcare workers are stretched and worked in the way that they are. So for her to say that, it really moved me. So I'm telling your business, Freedom, but I'm telling everybody that is how that all went down. And so you just gave us this beautiful presentation, and you did exactly what you said you would. And here we have somebody on this line that practices in the field that says, hey, it is not completely your burden, that your provider should also really be meeting you in the middle with this communicating and with building the plan that works for you. So thank you again, Freedom. I totally appreciate you. Y'all, Freedom does not do this. This is not exciting and comfortable for her. It's a little bit outside of her zone, but she loves to serve and she loves to give. And when she knew that she could help somebody on this call, she didn't hesitate. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you. So Freedom, before I let you go, can you share 1, 2, or 3 practical steps that folks on this call might be able to take, whether it's having meaningful conversations with their providers or looking for providers that'll listen to them, whatever it is in the scope of wellness and self-care? What can you share with the group in terms of what practical steps they might be able to take better care of themselves?
I mean, I think it's important for us to individually identify what happiness, love, and feeling safe looks like for us. And so what quality of care may look like for me may look different for someone else. And so assessing that, assessing what would make you happy, what would make you feel loved, is important. And like I said, it looks different for everyone. For me, as a clinician, I haven't worked since March of this year. I found myself feeling depleted caring for patients who were fighting COVID. And I knew it was time for me to rest. And so for me, rest was what is important for now as it relates to my self-care. And for me, some days it just means not doing anything. Most days it involves yoga and meditation and spending quality time. But that's what I'm doing right now. And it's difficult because I'm not working. And we typically believe that our source is the jobs that we do. If we don't go to work, then our basic necessity like food, shelter, and clothing won't be met. And so just taking the time just to know that I am my source and just resting is just self-care for me right now. And it can change daily, hourly for you, and that's okay, So I think really sitting down and having an honest conversation on what makes you happy is practical.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. So I'm just going to repeat it for our audience and for our note takers to make sure we got your practical advice, getting closer to self-care. Identify what happiness, love, and feeling safe looks like for you individually. That's your practical advice. That's awesome. Thank you so much. You're amazing. We can go on to our next slide. And our next slide will take us right into our next presenter, Sir Jose Bright. I'm sorry, before we go, are there any questions? Please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to just echo what I'm seeing being said in the comments for Freedom. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you 1,000 times on behalf of everybody in the world. Thank you, right? As a provider who gets it, who understands that the patient has to be an important part in the care. And for understanding that while you have the expertise, they are the expert. And I think that's so beautiful because I feel if more providers sit in that space to help patients create plans that were realistic for their life and the style of life that they have, you probably would see more compliance. So thank you. That's one point. The second point I want to say is I honor you for honoring yourself in a time like this. That is a radical act of self-love and self-care, not necessarily allowing what society and other folk would deem important. And for you to say, you know what, yeah, that's important, but I am too. Mm-hmm. So good for you. And I wanted to acknowledge that out loud because that is so brave. That is so courageous. And yes, sis, thank you.
Thank you, sis.
Oh my goodness, that was so good. I'm feeling feels, y'all. Stephanie in the chat said, Freedom, she admires you for doing what you need to for yourself at this time. Also, let's see here. Nisha shared that she loves this presentation. She's and she feels like working together with the provider on a plan rather than receiving an unrealistic plan and feeling shame about an inability to meet the plan requirements would make a huge difference for so many people. That's beautiful, Nisha. Thank you for sharing. Is there anyone else in the audience or in our environment with any questions or concerns or comments for Freedom before we move on to our next guest? Freedom, your presentation was amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And of us so far, she's the only one that followed the directive in terms of speaking slowly. I'm sure the interpreters were like, oh, thank God, because you and I talk fast, but we have to in our, that's what we do. So thank you. Thank you. Without delaying us any further, I'm going to introduce you to our next speaker. Sir Jose Bright joins us to bring the conversation full circle with practical ways we can all use mindfulness for self-care and mental health, regardless of perceived barriers. Based in Atlanta for the last 5 years, Sir Jose Bright has coached executives and entrepreneurs. He's facilitated strategic planning and board development processes, conducted radical equity workshops, and consulted on community initiatives in Cobb County and the South Fulton County region, both in Georgia. He has been a guest lecturer at Morehouse College on poverty in the 21st century, at Spelman College on nonprofit governance, and at Kennesaw State University on design thinking, social innovation, and social enterprise. Please join me in welcoming Sir Jose Bright, who has a wonderful presentation for us today on mindfulness and meditation. Welcome, Sir Jose.
Greetings, and I send you unconditional love and compassion. And I'd like to take you through a process to put the previous presentations together and give you a tool to help you to move your self-care forward. So let's just get started with the slide deck. You can go beyond that one and the next one. Okay, perfect. I'd like for you to just assess your stress levels right now from 0 to 10. With respect to stress, how are you feeling? And just jot it down. It's important for you to jot it down because we're going to do this test again at the end of this presentation. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So a lot of people have been talking about mindfulness, and it's important for us to understand what it is. Basically and simply, it's a matter of bringing your awareness, bringing your attention to the present moment without judging. Okay, it's that simple. That's what mindfulness really is. And it's a process to help you to get back control and allow your inner voice to come out and bring you the clarity, the calmness, and the enhanced performance to move you forward. And so we do this lovingly and with compassion. And when you do that, that allows a healing process to happen inside of you. And so it is truly transformational. The moment we stop thinking about the past, worry about the future, but stay in the present moment, it has transformational power. So let's go to the next slide. And so you can do mindfulness a number of ways, from brushing your teeth to preparing a meal made with love, to walking, to the bus stop. And so you can be mindful, just not thinking about the past or the future, but just enjoying the present moment. You can be mindful even eating. Taste the ingredients going down your throat and feel the physical sensations of them actually going to the stomach. So let's go to the next slide. And then there's this concept called meditation. Now, meditation, you can only do sitting or standing. Mindfulness, you can do in any position. But meditation is a tool of mindfulness. It is a tool, and it helps you to focus on the present moment using breath, a body scan, repeating a syllable, a word, a phrase over and over, looking at a candle or a picture and bringing your awareness to that, listening to sound, and I play singing bowls, crystal singing bowls, or you can also go through a guided mindfulness meditation. And we're going to do that a little bit later. Let's go to the next slide. So when you are in a mindfulness meditation, getting comfortable, you can only sit or lie down. And so when you sit, your feet have to be flat on the floor, your back straight. And as Dr. Rose spoke earlier about chakras, these are energy wheels from the tail of your spine all the way up to the crown of your head. And they need to spin so that they can work and bring you energy. And so if you're sitting and lying with your back not straight, you're blocking the ability for the energy wheels to work. Lying down is fine, but I would recommend you don't do this when you first wake up or when you're about to go to sleep, because you will fall asleep. Let's go to the next one. As you can see in the picture here, when you do a mindfulness meditation, do not cross your feet, do not cross your arms. Your body has to be in a position where you're not blocking the energy. Just like the back has to be straight, you cannot cross your arms and fold your arms and cross your legs. Next slide. And so I always like to ask the question, who meditates? And I work with a lot of people, and they want to know, well, why do I have to do this? Who else does this? This doesn't sound like it's going to be of benefit. Well, let's just take a look at the next slide to see who actually meditates. So you could see very successful people meditate, from Oprah to the former First Lady of the White House, and everyone in between. And the reason why they meditate, it's because it brings them so much benefit and clarity where they can be successful in their space, in their field. Let's go to the next slide. And so you could see in the second and bottom rows, more and more people around the world are now meditating, and schools are now offering it. Programs for young people are now offering it. Women in particular are going to programs where they can actually learn and build a practice of mindfulness meditation. Let's go to the next slide. And so there is science behind this. There are medical journals. There's compelling evidence. Harvard University did brain scans on Buddhist monks and saw the difference in the brains compared to those who don't meditate. And many, many articles and books have been written on mindfulness and meditation. So let's go to the next slide so that you can see the documented evidence of how mindful. I'm not sure what's going on, but I hear an echo. But just take a look at the list. What came up earlier in the presentations, there was lots of stress, anxiety, etc. And so if you build a mindfulness meditation practice, you can actually reduce some of these toxins and actually replace them with positive energies to help you to not just get through a day, but to add great value to yourself, your family, your community, and the planet. So let's go to the next slide. And so I always get asked about mindfulness and mindfulness meditation and religion? Well, the issue is that what I practice, what I share is it's a mindfulness-based stress reduction program that was created by a professor at the University of Massachusetts Medical Center. And it has been created since 1970, and millions of people around the world are now using the mindfulness based stress reduction program. So what we're doing is it's about going inside of self, bringing the best of self, reducing some of the difficult thoughts, emotions, pains in the body, and transforming so that you have the clarity, the focus, and a healthier body and mindset to move it forward. So you can have a religious connotation to it. If you're a Buddhist monk, of course. And some Christians, you look at prayer and meditation. And so from that perspective, meditation is listening to God and prayer is talking to God. But in the mindfulness meditation that I'm going to share with you, we're not really actually incorporating a God into the process, but it's having you go to an inner perspective of self to grow a healthier, better version of you. So let's go to the next slide. And so there's a wonderful book. This is the author of and founder of a program that is worldwide now. It's the mindfulness-based stress reduction program. This is the foundation of the work that I do. And it is a wonderful process. And I've been using it for a number of years, helping people to build a mindfulness meditation practice. Let's go to the next slide. And so let's deal with some of the myths about meditation, particularly mindfulness meditation. Some people feel that I'm not successful because there's no way I can just empty my mind. I can never be a blank canvas. Well, you have about 60 to 80,000 thoughts per day, and there is no way you're going to be able to wipe the slate clean. And so mindfulness, it's more about focusing on the present moment, whether it's your breath, the sound, visualizing something, and your mind will wander, and it's okay. And you just do that without judgment. And once you become aware you've wandered, just quickly come back to the present moment, the focus of your attention. And some people feel, well, I'm waiting to have a date with God. Well, you know, that may not happen until you build a solid practice. And then some people feel, well, I can't do this. I don't know how to do it. And so they just decide, I'm not going to do it anymore. Well, when you start out, even if you have a 1/10 of a second of stillness, you were successful. Next slide. And so it's important for you to be comfortable. And so if you feel the need to scratch or move a leg because of the blood circulation, go ahead and do that and just get back to the present moment and the attention of your focus. Let's go to the next slide. And so this is critical. When you go through a mindfulness meditation, these are the stages that you go through. The first one is settling. That's all about getting comfortable. If you're sitting, the right position. If you're lying, the right position. And then when you're ready, you gently close your eyes. And then the witnessing, that is about, if we're doing one on breathing or sound, that is what you're going to bring your present attention to, without judgment, without focusing on the past or the present, but I mean the past or the future, but you're focusing on the present moment. You're witnessing your breath. You're witnessing the physical sensation of the body. You're witnessing an image that's right in front of you. And naturally, you're going to drift. You're going to wander, and that is okay. And so as soon as you notice you've drifted from your breath or from a sound or from a visualization, without judgment, you just gently come back to that. You surrender and stay in the present moment, focusing on your breathing or something else. And you may get lucky enough to experience a moment of stillness. Let's go to the next slide. And so for me, I always start people off with breathing. Breathing is huge in a mindfulness meditation. Breathing, you're inhaling the oxygen from the environment around you. And on the exhale, you're getting rid of the waste, the carbon dioxide in your body. And so it's important for you to connect beyond self to our environment. And so with each breath, you are renewed. And so focusing on the breath reminds us that we are alive, irrespective of whatever is going on in your world around you. You are alive, you are breathing, and let's connect to that. And what I always suggest to people is that you have to breathe from the diaphragm. You have to feel the energy on the inhale, and on the exhale, you feel the energy because you're breathing from the diaphragm. And then there's a spiritual component too about the diaphragm. This is where you connect to Mother Earth and the divine as you inhale. It's not just the oxygen from the trees and the environment, but you're going deeper into Mother Earth and way, way out there into the cosmic realm. Let's go to the next slide. And so I love this quote by the author of the Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction Program. He says, breathing is no longer just breathing. Held in awareness, it's transformed, as is everything else. It's all in how you are in relationship to experience. Next slide. And so I can talk on and on and on about the wonders of mindfulness meditation, but it's very experiential. And so I'd like to take you through just a brief mindfulness meditation. And you can experience the physical sensations, the stages of the process. And I'm hoping, given the fact that a number of you are feeling overwhelmed, feeling stressed, and as beautiful women who serve unconditionally, you give very little time to yourself. And if you can give yourself 3 minutes in the morning and another 3 minutes in the afternoon or evening, and over time build it out to 30 minutes in the morning and then 30 minutes again in the afternoon or evening, you will start to build a practice of mindfulness and meditation. And so when you are in the world, you will witness more, you will have more compassion, you will have more love to offer, and you will have the clarity and the focus needed to move you beyond just getting through the day, but building a legacy. Because there's an African proverb for me. When a man dies, a library is burnt to the ground. When a woman dies, civilization is destroyed. And so we need our mothers, our daughters, our aunts, our grandmothers to continue to build community. So let's get ourselves comfortable. By comfortable, you can lie down or you could sit. And just make sure if you're sitting, your feet are flat on the floor and your back is straight. And just make sure your shoulders are relaxed. And if you don't know what to do with your hands, just put them in your lap. And your palms, I want you to have them facing down because you need some grounding and some stability and some vitality. Okay. And when you're comfortable, just gently close your eyes. Next slide. So from your diaphragm, I want you to take a long, slow, deep breath in and hold it and let that wonderful energy circulate throughout your being. And on the exhale, share that beautiful energy to family, community, planet, and all existence. Let's take another beautiful breath of renewal. Inhale. hold it, and share it to family, community, planet, and all existence. One more time, inhale, hold it, and release it. Now bring your breath to its natural flow, its natural rhythm. And just keep your awareness on your as you inhale and as you exhale. And your mind is probably wondering, and you know that's okay. Just gently acknowledge you've drifted off. And without judgment, come back to the sensation of the breathing. And to anchor the breathing, I'd like for you to get in touch with the physical sensation of the breath. I want you to feel the rising and the falling of the breath in your belly. And if the mind continues in the wondering, without judgment, come back and let's give the mind a job. Let it silently say rising on the inhale and falling on the exhale. And let's just do this for a second. Feel the rising of the belly and the falling of the belly. Now, as you breathe with your beautiful breath, visualize your breath is painting a ribbon in a circular shape right in front of your heart. On the inhale and the exhale, that is your paint, making this beautiful circle. You can go as fast as you like or as slow as you like. And just keep repeating, making the circle with your breath over and over and over. Now let's take a long, slow, deep breath in. Hold it. And gently release it to family, community, planet, and all existence. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes and welcome back to this space, this time, this purpose. Next slide. So how do you feel right now? Next slide. What's your stress level right now? And just jot it down. And hopefully you've seen a shift, a decrease in your stress level. And if you do this every single day, twice a day, you are building a mindfulness meditative practice. And it will certainly uplift, empower, and help you to add greater value. Next slide. So I would strongly recommend you keep a journal. Every time you go through a meditation, as soon as you finish the meditation, have your stress level there before and after. Share what came up during the meditation, how you feel, what insights you received. And over time, you'll be able to track the trends. You'll see if you started out at an 8 stress level, over time, it will start to go down. In the meditation, you'll start to have certain feelings and certain thoughts, and maybe you'll feel overwhelmed, maybe you'll feel very stressed or depressed or having lots of anxiety, but over time, you'll start to feel calmer. And so you can take what you learn that you download from the mindfulness meditation and you've captured in your journal. It's actually going to help you in your day-to-day life. Next slide. So I just want to leave you with this. Please do this once in the morning and again in the afternoon or evening, even if it's for 1 minute, 2 minutes, or 3 minutes. This is about building a practice. It doesn't work as much if you just do it once. If you do it on a regular basis, you will see amazing transformational results. And so try to find a space every day that you can go to and make it yours. Put some flowers, put some photographs, have some rocks, put something personal about yourself in that space and treat it as your space, your sacred space. And that's where you go to meditate. And then you will start to see some of the wonderful, wonderful benefits. Next slide. So again, don't judge yourself. Love yourself. Be patient. And just have the eyes of a child of innocence and purity and openness to a process. Trust it. Have no goal other than to be in the present moment. And just accept yourself because you are beautiful. You are amazing. You are wonderful. And you are needed. Let go of the story that is not yours and tap into the story that is. Next slide. Commit and discipline yourself to do it. Build a routine. If you're going to do it in the evening, stay awake. If you have to set a goal, let it be peace of mind. And know that all of this is helping you to be the better version of you. Next slide. Many blessings, and I send you cosmic, unconditional love, divine and infinite compassion.
Wow, that was amazing. Thank you so much. I almost don't want to start back talking because the vibe is just right. Thank you so much. That was amazing. Sir Jose, I'm not sure if you have eyes on the chat, but it's going off again. Both you and Freedom really impressed our audience. They're very happy with that presentation. There are folks giving feedback saying they feel better. It was incredible. I know for me, I went from between a 3 and a 4 down to between 1 and 2. And it was just that fast. It didn't take much. So that was absolutely incredible. I agree with you, Amanda. Thank you, Sir Jose, for being with us today. So we are almost at the end of this, which feels great because it did not feel like 2 hours. They say time flies when you're having fun. So this has really, really been a very good conversation. I think that we've covered a whole lot from barriers to trauma to ways to have conversations with our healthcare providers, to ways to cope with trauma and ways to start those conversations with our healthcare providers. And then we ended it with that beautiful presentation from Sir Jose Bright about how we can practice mindfulness on a daily basis to really, really get closer to where we want to be in terms of our well-being and our mental, mind, body, spirit goals. So I feel so full that I'm rambling here. I need to get it together, and meditation does that, y'all. I want you to know it. It can really reset to the point where you're like, where am I? What's happening? But that was, in a good way, in a really, really good way. Daesan, no. my supervisor, no.
Come on,
no.
Come on, girl.
No. I'm a moderator today, not a singer. I do sing and my boss is inching me to do it. Oh, just a refrain or two, please. Oh my goodness. Okay, so if the song that comes to mind, and I can't believe I'm doing this. No, okay, but the song that comes to mind is Somewhere Over the Rainbow for some reason, and it takes me back to the gratitude and the hopefulness that we talked about earlier when we discussed our emotions. So one of the things that I do for self-care for myself and for others is I share a gift of song. And so I'm going to sing just a little bit of Somewhere Over the Rainbow for you guys. And I could hide behind the fact and say because my boss told me to, but no, I actually love to, so I'm gonna do it. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops up way upon the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Somewhere over the rainbow blue, birds fly. Birds, they fly over the rainbow. Why? Then why can't I? I can't believe she talked me into doing that, but thank you, everybody. Oh my goodness, this has been so fun. It has not felt like 2 hours. It feels so amazing to be in this space with y'all. The energy is great. Andy, Taylor, all of y'all, thank you so much. From our audience, I mean, I'm so full, I almost don't even want to ask you if you have any questions, but please, if you do, are there any questions? Are there any last minute things that we want to share? Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for your beautiful feedback. I'm just reflecting all of y'all. I'm the total combination of all of us here today. So thank you so much. Thank you, Rosalind. If there are no additional questions, if we all feel complete, if you feel as complete as I do, I'm going to give grace and give you back 10 minutes of your time, if it's okay with the tech team over at White Ribbon Alliance, for us to end about 10 minutes early. I'm okay with it. I'm sure we can all use an extra 10 minutes. Although it's been really awesome. I could keep you here for another hour, to be quite honest. Sir Jose, Freedom, Dr. TaMara, thank you isn't enough. I wouldn't have been able to do it without you. Thank you, White Ribbon, for inviting Sister Love to be a part of this. For anybody that would like to find out more about our organization, please feel free to visit our website at www.sisterlove.org. Remember, Sister Love is on a mission to eradicate the adverse impact of HIV and AIDS among women and their families in this country and abroad. And we are so happy that you've joined us today. Amazing session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, White Ribbon and Tech Change. Thank you, guys. Your team has been amazing. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Please be sure to follow the link in the chat to provide feedback on this session. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much.